Ah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for clicking in and committing to spending a bit of time this morning talking about mindfulness and the use of feedback to foster student belonging. Before we begin, I want to make the point that while my focus is on online asynchronous spaces, these techniques work just as well in traditional classroom settings. So whether you are online only or looking forward to returning to an in-person session in fall, contemplative pedagogies do make space for everyone and every format. In our session this morning, I am, on the one hand, responding to the persistent notion that online asynchronous education, in comparison to traditional higher ed settings, is and always will be deficient. Of note, this assumption immediately presumes that sharing the same physical space at an agreed upon time automatically and definitively means that the participants in that room are fully present, fully paying attention, fully engaged. Maybe. The other, and perhaps larger issue, is the fact that much of our lives are mediated through digital technologies, and the refusal to recognize how this fact should shape our current approach to higher ed could further jeopardize the value of both traditional and online educational settings. Yet, if we're willing to step into these spaces, to innovate, to push and pull at the boundaries of what's possible, we can create intentional moments that not only invite students to learn how to use these technologies with critical attention, but also to do so, at least within the educational setting, with a sense of belonging and purpose. What this calls for then is mindful presence. The creation of a type of embodied, energetic, and compassionate presence within binary code could be perceived as a challenge. One way to approach this challenge is through mindfulness and an intention to be fully human inside of and through an LMS, which requires that beyond showing up in whatever way that manifests in our individual courses, we embody a type of non-physical and perhaps energetic presence. Before we go any further, it would be instructive for me to understand where we are as a community in terms of meditative or mindfulness practices and the concept of presence. And for this, we were intended to have some polls come up, and I'm just double checking that we are having a technical issue with that, which, as we are all well aware, happens. So we just roll with it. So instead of us having access to the poll, responding and seeing the responses as a community, I'm simply going to put the polls into our chat, and if people want to respond within the chat, that's wonderful. Or it's just a way to assess personally where we are as individuals. So for our first poll, I'm going to bring in those two questions now. So the first is, how frequently do you engage in a mindfulness or meditative practice? And the second is, what obstacles do you face in your mindfulness or meditative practice, assuming that there is one in place? And again, the purpose to the polling was to create a bit of community, which can't happen right now, and that's fine. Technology. So I will step in. So we've got Michelle and Calvin, a couple of people saying daily contemplative practice, which is lovely. I myself, in wanting to contribute to this community space, that I might be an equal participant, will divulge that I also have, Stacy says a couple of times, most days of the week is Becky. So that's wonderful. I have a daily meditative practice. Andy says 3 to 4 times a week. Thank you all so much for participating in the chat. When I fall out of my practice, more often than not, it results from time or life circumstances, which I do imagine is what prevents most of us from maintaining. And Barbara, not daily, but a few times a week, twice per day from Chris. Wow. I want to talk to you about that, Chris. That's great. So in our second poll, what I'm asking then is the ability for us to be present in our classes. So let me go ahead and post that to the chat. And many, as I'm glancing through here, many time constraints and life circumstances, external distractions are what prevent us. So the second poll is asking if we feel fully present and engaged in our classes, either asynchronously or synchronously. As much as we can be. I don't know what, I don't know how to be fully present in online asynchronous spaces, or I'm not really sure what presence means. And that word is bandied about a bit. So we're going to define it for the purposes of our community exchange here. But again, to step into this space of, what my answers are. To me, the first thing that came to mind was it depends. So some days I do feel fully present and engaged, even within the asynchronous environment. And at other times, which often depends on life and time, I know that there are improvements that I can make. So returning to the concept of mindful presence within and through the LMS, our individual personal mindfulness practices will necessarily come into play, which means that we need to be able to connect to mindfulness and to understand how we as individuals meditate. So before we get to the core of what I want to offer through this session, there's a bit of foundation that needs to be laid. And because of the polls can simply give me insight that I didn't previously have, where we are as a community. I did fortunately build in a little bit of flexibility within the presentation so that I can back off a little bit and talk a bit more about mindfulness, so that those of us who don't have a daily practice or from poll 2 are thinking like, what is presence and what are you talking about? We're going to lay that foundation right now. So mindfulness at its core is the practice of awareness, of observing thoughts instead of becoming enslaved by or identified with them, to borrow from Eckhart Tolle. Also, to borrow from Tolle, is that mindfulness allows us to recognize and step away from what he calls the egoic mind, the mind that wrestles with feelings of superiority and inferiority and quickly judges others as a means of self-protection and self-promotion. And it is mindfulness that invites us to create and to step into dialogues with others, not for the purpose of winning, but instead for learning, sharing, and appreciating, what Thich Nhat Hanh calls the extension of loving kindness. As Judith Simmer Brown explains, quote, most of the time we are caught rehashing the past or rehearsing the future and oblivious of the opportunity of each moment. Mindfulness practice points out the possibility of dropping cycles of thoughts that endlessly replay, bringing us very simply and consciously into the present. We have the possibility of genuine creativity in the freshness of that moment, end quote. The process of meditation, then, is a means through which these discoveries are made. For those of us who don't meditate or feel as though we can't meditate, I would like to invite us to reflect upon what activities we engage in that allow us to be simply and fully in the moment. For example, many years ago, I tried Zen meditation, and the class invited us to focus on the breath. If the mind wandered, return to the breath. Not knowing at that time what focusing on the breath meant I became hyper focused and hyper analytical. Why was I feeling that? Is that normal? She said that to send the breath to places in the body that were experiencing pain. My breath goes to my lungs. What is she talking about? Everyone else seems to be doing this. Why can't I? This is uncomfortable. I hate this. I can't meditate. My legs hurt. When is this over? True thoughts going through my mind at that moment. It wasn't until years later that I realized that I was meditating and had been all along. My meditation was hiking. When I hiked, everything else went away. I didn't think about a paper that I had to write or the stress of a comp's defense. I would hike until all I was aware of were my footfalls on the trail, my breathing, and the jingling of my dog's tags. In those moments, I was fully present, aware of my surroundings, feeling connected to nature, and unconcerned with the mental drama that my mind created. Thoughts such as, what if I fail? What if I can't prove my thesis? What if I'm just a fraud who is about to be called out? Which I'm sure are thoughts we've all been through during PhD programs. Those thoughts no longer mattered. At that time, through this meditative practice, I was able to find a bit of bliss. My purpose here in sharing this is the fact that sitting meditation, which I can happily do now, but once thought was the only form of meditation, isn't. There are various forms that are available to us. Some people run, others drive, some ski, and some wash the dishes. The practice doesn't have to look a certain way, and others don't need to agree that it's a beneficial style of meditation. All that is required is that it works for you. And here's what's really exciting about the inclusion of awareness in our classes. Once we can learn how to be fully present, where we aren't distracted by thoughts about what happened yesterday, what we need to do tomorrow, or who might be pinging us on our phones, where we are aware of and release when appropriate, and it's usually always appropriate, the distractions of the egoic mind, whether we are embodied or disembodied in our classroom space matters less. And this is a point that I want to underscore. We all know when we are on the receiving end of a distracted individual, whether on the phone, in person, via text, over Zoom, through an email, a person's true presence, their ability to be in the present without those distractions, is apparent. In Learning as a Path, Not a Goal, Contemplative Pedagogy, Its Principles and Practices, Fran Grace explains the benefits to the human collective of an individual's level of self-knowledge and self-mastery. Quote, certainly this is easy to notice at the interpersonal level, where we register the differential effect of a peaceful person versus an agitated one. Furthermore, in the classroom, a professor's heart coherence can be detected via electromagnetic measurement to affect students within a radius of 10 feet. She cites a study by Burmark and Fournier to prove this. In sum, she writes, our inner being has an effect on the world around us, end quote. And while there have been no similar studies done about the energetic exchange between a teacher and student via an LMS, our own lived experience with digital tech via Zoom, text message, email, etc., does suggest that such an exchange is at the very least possible, if not probable. How then can we start to step into such presence to let our students know that independent of a physical or virtual space, we are showing up with mindful awareness? One place certainly is through the use of feedback. And speaking of intersubjectivity and contemplative pedagogy, Dana Schneider and Elizabeth Keenan argue that, quote, one of our most powerful teaching tools is our presence. For it is through our presence that we first begin to know our students and are known to them. And it is this relational connection that fuels and produces attention, balance, compassion, and altruism, end quote. Further, the ways in which we encounter one another contributes to the potential to set up spaces of transformation. Quote, "It is in the mutuality and reciprocity of the exchange that we experience an intersubjective encounter, or the shared experience created in the joining of two or more minds, revealing how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts." End quote. The use of feedback as an intentional creative encounter then has the power to shift the ways that we conceive of commentary away from what students fear, judgment, and toward a conversation that invites them to know that they are seen and valued within the class community. And speaking of this type of intentional acknowledgement, Rogers and Rader-Roth contend that, quote, "From the learner's point of view, the moment is one of recognition, of feeling seen and understood, not just emotionally, but cognitively, physically, and even spiritually. It is a feeling of being safe, where one is drawn to risk because of the discoveries it might reveal. It is the excitement of discovering oneself in the context of the larger world, rather than the worry of losing oneself in the process." End quote. Feedback, to put it bluntly, has the potential to shift a student's own presence within the class in unexpected and transformative ways. And here we have, and I'm just going to check. Okay. We had a third poll ready, which I am going to bring into the chat. And this contends with our main objective. I know that we have more than one, but the main objective in providing feedback to the class community. And once again, if you feel called to share within our chat space, you're welcome so to do. Otherwise, we can just consider this as a reflective opportunity. And the options that I've offered to explain the grade, to offer advice about how to improve, to support each individual on their journey, or to give or to get them to read the feedback. And because we have the chat option, if there's another option that you would like to add, you're welcome so to do. Okay. And to Stacy, the poll. Oh, I sent it. Apologies. I just sent that as a direct message. So thank you, Stacy, for alerting me to that. There we go. That is now available to everyone. Again, technology. Okay. So how to support each individual. Yeah, all four. I did not offer that as an option. Yes, fantastic. So a lot of people wanting to support each individual. That's wonderful. So I'm going to put my hands up and confess that in preparing for this session and preparing my proposal, I started thinking about what my impetus was and my objectives. They certainly shifted at this point, but when I started, things were a little bit different. So I do want to offer that evolution to us here. So when I first started teaching as a grad student, my objective was to explain the grade in order to forestall student complaints. Um, and I would, if I had time, provide a bit of direction about how to improve. It did not enter my consciousness that feedback was an opportunity to provide anything beyond those two aims. The vast majority of the time, students didn't read the feedback, and I was caught in a loop of knowing that I needed to provide commentary, but also feeling well annoyed that I was wasting my time because they weren't reading it. So now my primary goal is to get them to read it. And since I teach writing and rhetoric, I tasked myself with, as you might imagine, a study of my audience. So one of the silver linings of the dark COVID cloud has been a recognition of the extent to which we all need greater support. We're all just people doing the best that we can. And sometimes the going is easy breezy, and other times it's tumultuous and uncertain. But what COVID exposed is the extent to which we are connected and can thrive when we recognize that relationship. We could see this as a call for contemplative pedagogy. As Schneider and Keenan remark, the psychological dimension of the experience of the self, quote, involves experiences of attunement, shared emotions and ideas, affective engagement, and feeling understood by others. The mutual co-arising dimension involves interactions that form and inform participants' knowing and experiences of themselves in an emergent, generative manner, end quote. My style of feedback as we moved through the COVID world became intentionally co-arising, though I was unaware of that terminology at the time. I wanted only for my students, especially those who were asynchronous and likely feeling far more disconnected than my synchronous students, to know that I saw them. To do this, I utilized a different style of textual feedback, which we're going to look at in just a moment. And I tried out the audio and visual tools in Canvas. That's the LMS that CU uses. And I was struck by the difference. Students responded to my feedback to an extent that surprised me. And in the cases where I used audio or video, actually made a reference to the things that I had said. What's more, I noticed that their attention to the feedback was more consistent, their work improved, and they themselves became more present within the class. I had students remark that they were excited about a project because I was excited in the video explanation. And one student emailed to tell me that he was concerned about taking an online class, but soon looked forward to logging in because of how enthusiastic I was within the course. As we have all experienced, our energy impacts that of the class, either in a physical space when it is clear that we don't want to be there for whatever reason, life comes up, or in the virtual world, our energy and the extent to which we show up in a mindfully present way matters. I genuinely want my students to want to log in, to look forward to our projects, to show up authentically, to read the feedback. And little by little, my own path to learning how to use this space is translating to them. And also, knock wood, that continues. So I do want to take a moment to look at a couple of examples of feedback that I offered pre-COVID and how my style has shifted before we take a bit of a break and do some journaling on our own so that we can leave this session prepared and dialed in for the strategies that will work best for us in our individual practices and classes that we teach. So I am going to screen share. All right. So pre-COVID, fall 2019, the assignment was a creative nonfiction essay. And the feedback style, I will say that I started offering different kinds of feedback that I identify in each assignment. So there are 3 different levels. The first level is bullet points. So students just want to get in and get out style of feedback. The second, which about 90% of people option, is the response in a form of a letter where I explain things that are going well, a couple of points that would strengthen their work, and then some things that I found particularly worth noting. And then the third style is inline commentary. So I will go through the document itself and write notes inline to students. And pre-COVID, I thought that this was a great style. Like, hey, wonderful. Look at the comments. Looking at it now, okay, it communicates some stuff. It communicates that I thought that it's a great start, and check the comments. Beyond that, it's not really engaging to me. Returning to it and looking at as a reader, would I be excited about this feedback? No, I wouldn't. It would be kind of dull to read. So this was the feedback style, the letter. It was a course that I taught earlier this summer. And you will see that there is a lot more commentary here. The things that I want to point out are in the first paragraph, interesting essay, great step into this genre. In particular, I really appreciated the explanation of how things slowed down. These descriptions allowed me to step into that slowness as well, which was great. And then I have things that would strengthen the work. Examples. Oops, sorry. Examples and explanations. And then I'm wrapping it up with an aside. So here, you note that with your feet in the water, you were doing nothing. Were you really doing nothing, or did it just seem like nothing? It's not a question of disagreement, but rather one of philosophical perspective. There's no right answer. I'm just interested. So, what I really wanted to communicate to this student is that through the reading of their essay, I was not only brought in paragraph one, I was not only brought into the experience, and I became present because of the way that they wrote the piece, but also they were generating ideas in my mind. Like, is this nothing to sit with the feet in the water? What does that mean? Or is doing nothing a way of explaining something else? And so I wanted them to understand that their work was generating ideas on my end as well. And so this was a style that for me is more in line with demonstrating presence and engagement and bringing together the ability for my student and I to connect over a piece. So the feedback isn't about what's right or what's wrong. Like, yeah, we have to grade and we have to, it's important to offer that type of commentary, but also bringing in a little bit to demonstrate to them how their work allows us to see things in a different way or shifts a moment for us can be really powerful. Another example, pre-COVID, this is a multimodal video. This student selected none, so I also have that as an option. If they don't select, then it just goes to a default style and I make some comments. Um, Readability, it's all compact in one paragraph, so I don't think that that's great. And here it's just pretty, here are things that are going well, here are things to improve. Otherwise, or overall nice work. It doesn't feel very engaging. And returning to this and looking to it, I don't feel inspired. This I would look as a student and think, okay, that's why I got my grade, and move on. It wouldn't make me feel connected in any way. In spring, so intra-COVID, digital storytelling. So it's a similar piece to the multimodal composition. This student optioned a letter. And again, it's the same style, things that are going well in the beginning, things that could be tweaked to strengthen the piece. And then here, I want to call attention to what I started to do, starting to play a little bit more and allow more flexibility and more authenticity in my feedback. So it's such a good piece. The use of different videos, the laugh that you inspire about the bugs. Like, I genuinely laughed at her comment, so I wanted to make sure that she knew that she was successful there. The connection to the earth all work together to create a beautiful experience for your reader to share with you. So again, really attempting to bring into alignment the fact that the work that they are doing does connect with the people who are reading it. And there is something about that connection that, again, is greater than the sum of its parts. And then here, again, authentic, loved it. Like, absolutely, that was in my head. And while it's not formal and distant, it was genuine. And one other example that I have to share is uh, this was in an asynchronous class. So I have digital check-ins during the semester. And this student was going through a lot of very difficult life circumstances. And if I look back, I think before COVID, if a digital check-in had resulted in a student being very open with me about, the difficult things that they were facing, I likely would have said something like, this statement, I'm really sorry that you're struggling. I know things look bleak. You can do it. Here are the resources, at CU that are available to you. Reach out to me if you need. And I might have sent a follow-up email. But here, I really wanted the student to understand that what they were saying about their work, like I saw it in a different way. It's very easy, again, for the egoic mind to come in and judge and to say, this isn't good enough and you're not smart enough and it could have been better and how dare you. It's humiliating, right? I wanted the student to understand that this is a moment and it's not an ideal moment. And they were still showing up. They were still trying. And I wanted to acknowledge and to celebrate that and to encourage them to celebrate that. Like the world's never ideal, but we look when we judge our work or judge our contributions. In an ideal world, it would have been better. And there isn't an ideal world. This is what we're looking at. And this is what we're grappling with. And you're showing up and you're here and you're trying. Yay, you. And before I could send a follow-up email for this student, they reached out to me to let me know that things were better already since they had posted that response, and they also wanted to communicate that that they did feel seen, and that what they were going through did matter to people other than them. So again, I share that as a form of feedback. It's not feedback on an assignment, but a way of engaging with students to allow them to recognize that we see them, we acknowledge, again, that they're people and, doing the best that they can. They're not in a particular role. So yeah, I could keep talking about that, but I won't. I do want to send us off to do some journaling and then come back and give time to share your thoughts and ideas. So, my intention when we come back is to hold space for anyone who wants to step in, to feel supported and welcome to share whatever it is you want to share. And that our styles of feedback have to do with our individual ways of creating mindfulness and presence in our own lives, and certainly what we're able to offer have to do with myriad aspects. So all of what I've offered is simply my approach and the evolution of my pedagogy and the way that I'm using feedback to be more present to my students, to make them or to invite them to recognize my presence, but also to invite them to be more present within that space in turn. So I've got some journal questions for us to consider. I'm going to screen share, so they will be on the screen for us. I'm also going to paste them into chat, so you have two options to access the questions. And then we are going to return at 9:40 in order to share with one another, to reconnect before we continue on with our days. So let me go ahead and screen share first. And then I will also pull up chat. There we go. Okay, so I will see you guys at 9:40.
Okay, everyone, if you can hear my voice, we are a couple of minutes over 9:40, but I also want to honor the work that you're doing now. Getting these ideas down when they're fresh in our minds is really important. So let's go ahead and take another minute and a half and come back at 9:45, just so we have an opportunity to connect with one another very quickly before we end for today. Okay, so we are at 9:45. And again, just to reiterate, I do want to honor the work that you're doing. So if it would be more of to your benefit to continue your writing, you're absolutely welcome to do so. And you're welcome to keep your camera off and just remain focused where you are. If anybody would like to step in,
I'm going to stop my screen share. Um, and yeah, if anybody would like to step in, any questions, comments, I'm here. Otherwise, we can just continue to write.
While you were sharing your approaches, I was thinking about how important it might be to actually tell my students about my approach to giving feedback to help them understand what to do with it.
Yeah. Also, hi, Betsy. Um, but
Hi, Don.
I think that's fantastic. And so something that, yeah, I have not done. Um, and I think that that would really underscore the idea that the way that we're using feedback may well be different than what they're expecting or what they're used to. And so that would, I think, create more immediate impetus for them to read it, to understand, like, how is this different? And how, using it, if they know that we're present, if they know that, like, one of my one of my intentions is to be of benefit. So if they know that that's what I'm trying to do, immediately I think that that helps them understand that it's not about judgment or criticism or agreement with others. It's simply, about what's happening in a particular moment for them. Yeah, I love that idea. Thank you. Hmm.
Dawn, I was just curious a little more about your comments about the fact that annotating line by line in the work was fell flat for your students. And we've been kind of encouraged to do that. And I can see that students don't care and don't read it. And so you're saying that when you switch to more of a letter to them in return, that got a better and more positive result for you?
It depends on the student. So few students will ask for inline because it it becomes a little bit less personal because it's about, like, where I am as the reader in any one particular moment. So if I have a question about a passage or something's confusing to me, that style, I love that style because it allows me to step in and let them know moment by moment within their piece where I am, where I'm confused, where I think, a comment could be shifted, and I can help explain and bring in examples. And so it's a great, really engaging, interactive way to provide feedback. The point that I was trying to make is that most don't do that. But also in my first example, me pointing to the inline commentary, that's what I think fell flat. That in my mind at that moment, it was like, you asked for inline commentary, things are going well, check the comments, I'm out. Versus creating a space that would allow for me to explain a bit more fully and then use the inline comments as examples of what I was saying. Does that
Um,
does that help?
that's wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, I did need to clarify that point.
Well, it's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Don?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to
Hi.
comment. I just in reflecting on my own approach to feedback, I realized that my most successful, um, I guess, experiences have been when I've combined both a letter style and line by line. For the same reasons that were just mentioned, I think the line by line helps to make the feedback a little bit more concrete
Mhm.
because you can refer to a specific point in the student's work, and
Right.
that really helps to scaffold the process for the student.
Right. Yeah.
But without if I don't include a letter style, then you're right, it's the feedback is more impersonal, and only the motivated student will really say, okay, I know what I need to do. Thank you. This is practical and helpful.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't invite, um, I guess, a discussion or an ongoing dialogue in the way that a letter might. But
Right.
yeah, but I think more importantly, your examples of the letter style feedback demonstrate how you connect to the student's work,
Mhm.
and you are showing the student how you as a teacher are an engaged audience member. You know, you're like the engaged audience, and that, I think, that reinforces the purpose of any student work, which is to communicate, to express the students' ideas so that they can be understood by an
Right.
audience. So I thank you for helping me reflect on that a little bit more. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for that feedback. Like I've started optioning level 3, which is inline, because even with, for some students, I think that it's scary to look at their work in that way. So that's something that I would do like in a conference. But other students, like every single thing they turn in, that's what they want, because and they do refer back to those comments, or they will email me about those comments. And so I think for me, it's about learning what my own style brings, but also encouraging students to understand their needs and what works best for them. Um, but yeah, bringing in the the comments or letter style is definitely necessary for inline. Thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe I
And
misheard you at the beginning, but I thought that you mentioned something about giving feedback via video or audio
mhm.
and not just in writing. How did you go about doing that?
So I use the Canvas tools. So within, um, and this was, I got a question in chat, so I want to bring this in because I think it would be helpful for others. Is that within the prompt, at the very bottom of the prompt, I have types of feedback, and then I explain what each type um, offers and what so that they can make the selection. And then when they submit their work, there's a comment box, and so that's where they let me know what style they would prefer. And then within Canvas, in the ah, speed grading is where you will find the audio and video tools. So the video, that one that one takes some practice, but the audio is literally pressing audio record and talking. And that allowed me to say a lot more in a space. I think that students would have been overwhelmed by the amount of text, but it also allows for inflection. And so there's less of an opportunity for them to be having a bad day or to be a little bit concerned about feedback. And so to bring those fears to bear on what they read. And so I think being really enthusiastic, it allows them to feel encouraged, and um, like their work is appreciated. And so those tools, again, depending on the student, I think work really, really well. Hmm. And I'm just checking chat right now. Yeah, so Doris writes, when I taught, I provided feedback both letter style and in line. I even gave feedback in purple to avoid the punitive red. Students were deflated with the inline feedback, even though it was constructive, more specific, and what I thought was more helpful. It seemed the less inline feedback translated to less wrong, even in the comments, or if the comments were positive and encouraging. So um yeah, I think that, again, knowing what your students are looking for. And with inline, I tend to do the first page, page and a half, maybe two, and then I back off unless there's something that really pings, and that would be like, wow, I love this, like I will bring that in, but beyond that, I don't want them to be overwhelmed. So I am getting a note that we're at the end. The next session is in 5 minutes, so I apologize that that I didn't give you guys enough time, but hopefully there's enough to take a break and do whatever you need to do before the next session. Thank you so, so much for coming in and participating with me. I had a lot of fun. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out via email.